Dr. Naomi Harris had just signed the papers for her dream car when the blue lights flashed behind her. For a split second, she thought maybe it was a mistake-y coincidence. But then the officer got out, hand hovering over his gun, eyes locked on her like she was prey. "Step away from the vehicle, ma'am," he barked. The word ma'am came out like an insult, not a courtesy. Naomi was a law professor, a tenured one. 22 years of teaching constitutional law, civil rights, and the messy, beautiful promises of the 14th Amendment. She had defended strangers, mentored young attorneys, and sat across from senators arguing about reform. But none of that mattered now. The only thing this man saw was her skin. She looked down at her own reflection in the glossy midnight blue paint of her Tesla, the temporary tags still taped to the window, the smell of new leather still clinging to her clothes. She had paid for it and full wrote the check herself. But the officer didn't see a customer. He saw a suspect. "Sir, this is my car," she said evenly, forcing her voice to stay calm, though her pulse thundered in her ears. "I just purchased it at that dealership," she pointed behind her, "not even 5 minutes ago." His smirk was a slow, ugly thing. "Uh-huh. You got a receipt to prove that." She did. In her bag, neatly tucked inside a folder along with the title transfer and proof of insurance. She reached for it, but his voice cut through the air like a whip. "Hands where I can see them." Naomi froze. The crowd around them was growing. 2 dealership employees, a couple walking their dog, a teenager holding up his phone. Somewhere in the back of her mind, Naomi wondered if this moment would end up on the evening news, or worse, in the statistics she taught her students about Black Americans and fatal police encounters. "Officer, I am a law professor at Emory University," she said, her voice tight but steady. "I have all the documentation right here." "Lady, I don't care if you're the Queen of England," he snapped. "I got a call about a stolen vehicle matching this description. You fit the profile. Step away." Her stomach dropped. "You fit the profile." She had heard those words before when she was a teenager, stopped for walking home with a group of friends. When she was in her 20s, pulled over for driving too nice a car for this neighborhood. They were words that turned her identity into a weapon against her. Naomi straightened her spine. "With all due respect, I'm not stepping away from my own property. You're making a mistake." He took a step closer, his shadow stretching over her like a threat. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. A dealership manager, a young white man in a slim gray suit, hurried over, waving his hands. "Officer, wait. She's telling the truth. I just sold her this car." Here he held up the dealership's copy of the paperwork. The officer barely glanced at it. "We'll sort this out at the station." Naomi's jaw clenched. At the station meant handcuffs, mugshots, headlines that wouldn't bother with context. It meant a stain on her record she didn't deserve. And it meant giving in to something she had spent her whole career fighting against. The officer reached for her arm. She stepped back. "Don't touch me," she said sharply. "I am not under arrest, and you have no probable cause." He narrowed his eyes. "Ma'am, you're interfering with an investigation." "No," she cut him off, her voice rising. "You are interfering with my right to exist in this country without being treated like a criminal for owning something I worked for." The dealership manager looked caught between fear and outrage. "Officer, I'm telling you she paid in full. The paperwork's right here. The call you got, whoever made it must be a mistake." But Naomi could see it in the officer's posture. This wasn't about the car anymore. It was about control, about making sure she knew her place. The crowd began to record openly now. Phones tilted, fingers tapping screens. Naomi's heart pounded, but she kept her chin up. She knew if she faltered, if she let fear slip through, it would be used against her. Somewhere deep in her gut, an old memory surfaced. Her mother's voice, telling her as a child, "Baby, one day, they'll look at you and decide what you are before you open your mouth. On that day, don't let them be right." Naomi took a breath. "Officer, either you let me go, or I'll be filing a formal complaint before the end of the day. And I promise you, I know exactly how to make it stick." His jaw tightened. He glanced at the crowd, the cameras, the dealership manager holding up the proof like a shield. For a moment, it looked like he might double down. But the weight of all those eyes plus the irrefutable paper in front of him finally forced his hand. "Fine," he muttered, stepping back. "But don't think this is over." Naomi didn't answer. She didn't need to. She simply got into her car, started the engine, and drove away knowing this was far from the end. Because people like him didn't just disappear, and people like her didn't just stay quiet. Naomi's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than she realized. By the time she reached her driveway, her knuckles were pale, her shoulders locked in a tense, aching knot. She turned off the engine but didn't move. The quiet hum of the cooling Tesla felt strange after the intensity of the street confrontation. Her phone buzzed in her purse, then buzzed again, and again. She finally pulled it out. Dozens of unread texts, a flood of emails. Even her Twitter notifications were exploding, hashtags already circulating. Someone had posted a shaky phone video of the incident. In less than an hour, it had been shared thousands of times. Her name wasn't trending yet, but the phrases were already forming. Driving while black-owned car still suspect, she leaned back in the seat, staring at her ceiling through the windshield. This wasn't the first time she'd been profiled, but it was the first time the world was watching. And she knew that the narrative would already be splintering online. There would be the support her camp, and there would be the she must have done something wrong camp. People didn't need facts to form opinions. Naomi's phone rang this time, her best friend, Angela. "You okay?" Angela's voice came through loud, urgent. "I'm fine," Naomi lied. "Fine? Naomi, you're viral. I've seen 3 different news blogs post the video already. They're calling him Officer Stone. They don't have your name yet, but it's only a matter of time. I know. You need to control this before it controls you." Naomi closed her eyes. Angela was a PR consultant. She understood the speed at which stories metastasized online. "I'll call the university. They'll need to hear it from me first." "You're thinking like an administrator," Angela shot back. "Think like a lawyer. That man violated your rights on camera. You have documentation, witnesses, everything. You could bury him in court." Naomi hesitated. Suing a police officer was never simple. Even with proof, the legal system bent itself into knots to protect them. She had taught that very reality to her students. But this wasn't just about her anymore. The thought of letting it slide curdled in her stomach. The next morning, Naomi walked into her office at Emory's law school. Her inbox was a minefield. Emails from the dean, media requests, messages from colleagues expressing outrage or asking for details. She ignored them all for the moment and went straight to the dean's office. Dean Wallace, a stocky man in his 60s with a perpetually furrowed brow, looked up from his computer. "Naomi, I was going to call you in. I wanted to get ahead of it," she said, sitting down. "You've seen the video?" He nodded grimly. "I have. It's bad. For the officer, I mean. You handled yourself well. But the optics, she cut in sharply. "You mean the optics of a tenured black professor being accused of stealing her own car?" He held up his hands. "I'm not minimizing it. But you know how this goes. If the media finds your name, they'll drag your personal life into it. We need to be strategic." "I'm already being strategic," Naomi said. "I'm filing a complaint and pursuing legal action. Not just for His has to be challenged." Wallace studied her for a moment. "You're sure about this?" She met his gaze without flinching. "Absolutely." By lunchtime, her name had leaked. Reporters were calling her cell phone, showing up at the university gates. A local news station requested an on-camera interview. Naomi agreed, but only on her terms. She would speak about systemic issues, not just herself. The interview aired that evening. She sat in her living room, watching herself on screen, composed, articulate, unwilling to be reduced to a victim. "Officer Stone didn't just doubt my ownership of the car," she said into the camera. "He doubted my right to exist in that space, in that moment, as anything other than a suspect. This is not about one bad cop. It's about a culture that sees blackness as inherently criminal." By the time the segment ended, her phone was buzzing again, this time with messages of solidarity from strangers, former students, and civil rights organizations offering support. But not everyone was supportive. On social media, the backlash had begun. Edited clips of the video stripped away the dealership manager's defense, leaving only Naomi's refusal to step away from the car. She was resisting. She should have just complied. If she didn't do anything wrong, why get so defensive? The old, poisonous narratives. The same ones she'd been fighting her entire life. 3 days later, Naomi's attorney, Marcus Fields, stood in her living room, flipping through the case file. Marcus was tall, with an easy confidence and a voice that could slice through noise like a scalpel. "We have eyewitnesses, video, and a paper trail," he said. The dealership manager is willing to testify. This is strong. It's not just about winning, Naomi reminded him. It's about making sure the win means something. Marcus nodded. Then we'll make it mean something. He outlined their strategy. File a formal complaint with the police department's internal affairs, pursue a civil suit for violation of her constitutional rights, and leverage the media to keep public attention on the case. Naomi listened, but her mind drifted to the officer. Stone. She remembered his eyes cold, certain, almost eager. Men like him didn't see consequences often. Maybe never. She wanted that to change. When the lawsuit hit the press, it detonated. National outlets picked it up, linking it to larger conversations about racial profiling. Talk shows debated whether Naomi was a brave fighter or an overreacting academic looking for attention. The police department issued a statement. The officer involved acted on information provided by a credible source. The matter is under review. No apology. No acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Marcus smirked when he read it. Translation: they're lawyering up. 2 weeks later, Naomi walked into the courthouse for the first hearing. The marble floors echoed under her heels, the air heavy with the smell of old wood and disinfectant. Cameras flashed outside. Reporters shouted questions she didn't answer. Inside, she spotted Stone at the defense table, flanked by his attorney. He looked exactly as he had that day, square jaw, perfectly pressed uniform, and an expression that said, "This is a waste of my time." When their eyes met, he didn't look away. The hearing was procedural arguments over motions, deadlines, discovery. But Naomi felt the weight of it pressing in. Every word spoken in that room was another step toward a reckoning. As they left, a young black woman in a janitor's uniform stopped Naomi in the hallway. "I saw you on TV," she whispered. "I've been through the same thing. Thank you for not letting it go." Naomi felt something tighten in her throat. "We all deserve better," she said softly. Back home that night, she sat on her porch, listening to the cicadas hum. The legal battle would be long. Stone's side would try to paint her as angry, combative, uncooperative. They would twist her words, frame her dignity as defiance. But she had something they didn't: the truth and the will to see it through. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. 2 months into the case, Naomi's face had become a symbol, sometimes of hope, sometimes of controversy. Civil rights groups held rallies outside the courthouse with signs that read "Justice for Dr. Harris." But on certain corners of the internet, her photo was plastered beside captions like "Entitled Professor Plays the Race Card." She'd learned to stop reading the comments. The pressure mounted as discovery began. Marcus was meticulous, demanding bodycam footage, dispatch records, and any prior complaints against Stone. The police department dragged its feet, filing objections, claiming some documents were irrelevant or protected. But then, one afternoon, Marcus called with a shift in his voice Naomi had never heard before, something electric. "They messed up," he said. "We just got a partial release of Stone's internal file. Naomi, he's been investigated for profiling before. Twice." Her stomach flipped. Were they substantiated? Internal affairs couldn't determine misconduct, Marcus said, the sarcasm in his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "But there's a pattern. And if the judge lets us bring it in, it changes everything." The next hearing was different. The defense had been cocky before, but now they were tight-lipped, avoiding eye contact with reporters. Marcus stood and laid out the new evidence, the prior complaints, the similarities in language, phrases like "fits the profile," and "acting suspicious," echoing like a haunting refrain through years of reports. The defense attorney objected, of course, claiming it was prejudicial. Marcus countered with a precision honed over decades in civil rights litigation. "Prejudicial," he said, voice steady but cutting. "The prejudice here isn't in the evidence, sites in the pattern of behavior. My client isn't the first person this officer has treated as a criminal for existing while black. The court has a duty to see the full picture." The judge didn't rule immediately, but Naomi saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Interest. Maybe even concern. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was louder than usual. News vans lined the curb, satellite dishes pointing skyward like metal flowers. Naomi had started to recognize some of the regulars. The retired history teacher who always brought her coffee, the college student live streaming every update, the middle-aged white man who never spoke but always held a sign reading "Do Better, America." A reporter shouted, "Dr. Harris, do you think Officer Stone will lose his job?" Naomi stopped, considering her answer. I think he should lose the ability to treat citizens like suspects because of the color of their skin, she said. Whether that means losing his job is up to the department. But accountability is non-negotiable. That night, Naomi couldn't sleep. She paced her living room, the glow of the city outside her windows. The fight was exhausting, but backing down was never an option. She thought of her students, particularly the black and brown ones watching this unfold. She knew they saw themselves in her, and she knew what message it would send if she walked away. Weeks later, Marcus called again. We got the body cam footage. Naomi sat at her desk, gripping the phone. And you need to see it. In Marcus's office, the footage played on a flat-screen monitor. The camera view shook slightly as Stone approached her that day, but the audio was crystal clear. Step away from the vehicle, ma'am. Sir, this is my car. Lady, you fit the profile. Don't make this harder than it has to be. But then off mic, before the crowd gathered, Stone muttered something Naomi hadn't heard before. No way she bought this legit. Marcus hit pause. That's not suspicion, Naomi. That's bias. And it's on tape. Her chest tightened. The proof was right there. Is assumption, is prejudice, laid bare for anyone willing to hear it. The next filing from Marcus's office was a bombshell, a motion to include the bodycam audio as evidence of discriminatory intent. The defense scrambled, arguing it was taken out of context. But the context was the whole incident, and everyone could hear the disdain in Stone's voice. The judge set a trial date. Trial prep consumed Naomi's life. She spent hours with Marcus, rehearsing testimony, reviewing cross-examination strategies. Every question felt like a test, some straightforward, others designed to rattle her composure. Remember, Marcus said, they'll try to paint you as hostile. Keep your tone calm, even if they're baiting you. Jurors remember tone more than words. Naomi nodded. She'd faced hostile opposing counsel before, but this was different. This wasn't about a legal principle, it was about her. The first day of trial was electric. The courtroom was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Civil rights activists filled one side of the gallery. Uniformed officers sat stiffly on the other. The jury selection had been tense, with both sides scrutinizing every potential juror's body language, answers, even word choice. In the end, the panel was diverse racially, economically, politically. Naomi tried to take comfort in that. Marcus opened with a statement that made the jurors lean forward. This case is not about a misunderstanding. It's about an abuse of power rooted in prejudice. Dr. Naomi Harris is a law professor, a taxpayer, and a citizen with rights. Those rights were trampled because Officer Stone decided she didn't look like someone who could own a luxury car. And when power is abused like that, it demands accountability. The defense countered with their own narrative. Stone was acting in good faith on a stolen vehicle report. Naomi escalated the situation, and any perceived bias was unfounded. Naomi listened, jaw tight. She knew their playbook. She'd taught her students how this rhetoric worked. Now she was living it. When she took the stand, the courtroom went silent. Marcus guided her through the events. The purchase, the stop, the crowd, the officer's tone. She spoke with precision, but also with the quiet steel that had carried her through years of fighting for others. Then the defense attorney rose for cross-examination. You could have avoided all of this by simply stepping away from the vehicle, correct? Naomi met his gaze. I could have avoided being wrongfully detained by not existing as a black woman in his line of sight, too. But that's not something I can change. A few jurors' eyes flicked toward Stone. The most powerful moment came when Marcus played the bodycam clip. The room seemed to hold its breath as Stone's voice filled the air. No way she bought this legit. The words landed like a punch. Marcus let the silence after hang just long enough for everyone to feel its weight. By the end of the third day, Naomi felt drained. But she also felt the tide shifting. The jurors' faces had softened when she spoke about the fun of arrest, but of how quickly such encounters could turn fatal for people who looked like her. And when she left the courthouse, the college student with the live stream shouted into her phone, "Day 3, and Dr. Harris is killing it. This is history, y'all." By the fourth day of trial, the atmosphere in the courtroom felt heavier, as though everyone knew something irreversible was about to happen. The defense had one last card to ply: a police sergeant who would testify that Officer Stone had acted according to protocol. Sergeant Miller was in his late 40s, grizzled, wearing the kind of stoic expression that suggested decades of "I've seen worse." The defense attorney led him gently. Was Stone responding to a credible stolen vehicle report? Yes. Did he have reason to suspect the car could have been stolen? Yes. Did Naomi's refusal to step away contribute to the tension? Yes. It was a neat little box. They were building one where bias didn't exist, only procedures and protocols. But Marcus was ready. When it was his turn, he walked to the podium with a calmness Naomi recognized as the kind of calm that came before a scalpel cut something open. Sergeant Miller, Marcus began. You've reviewed the body cam footage, correct? Yes. And in that footage, Officer Stone says, no way she bought this legit. Is that part of your department's protocol? The sergeant hesitated. No, but Marcus didn't let him finish. Would you say that statement is an objective assessment or a personal assumption? Objection, the defense attorney barked. Overruled, the judge said. Miller shifted in his seat. It sounds like a personal assumption. And personal assumptions, especially ones based on who's driving the car, can be influenced by bias, correct? The pause was longer this time. Yes. Thank you, Sergeant. No further questions. The defense rested that afternoon. Marcus's closing argument was a masterclass in precision and humanity. This is not just about Dr. Harris, he told the jury. This is about every person who has been stopped, questioned, or treated as a suspect not because of what they did, but because of who they are. The Constitution does not say equal protection unless an officer feels otherwise. It says equal protection, period. You are the guardians of that promise today. The defense, in turn, tried to sow doubt. They repeated the words, good faith, like an incantation, urging the jury to see Stone as a man doing his job under difficult circumstances. Naomi listened, but her mind kept drifting back to her mother's voice, the warning she'd carried all her life. Don't let them decide what you are before you open your mouth. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. Naomi spent those hours pacing Marcus's office, ignoring the coffee he kept offering, staring out the window, as if the verdict might walk down the street toward her. When the call came that the jury had reached a decision, her stomach knotted so tight she could barely breathe. They returned to the courtroom. The air was electric, reporters' pens poised, cameras clicking softly, the public gallery holding its collective breath. The foreperson, a black woman in her early 50s, stood with the verdict slip in her hands. On the claim of violation of constitutional rights under the 14th Amendment, we find in favor of the plaintiff, Dr. Naomi Harris. Naomi felt her knees loosen. She heard a few muffled gasps from the gallery, the rustle of shifting bodies. For damages, the foreperson continued, we award the plaintiff $1.2 million. It wasn't just the money, it was the words in favor of the plaintiff. It was validation, on the record, for the world to see. Stone sat rigid at the defense table, jaw clenched, eyes fixed forward. Naomi didn't look at him long. He wasn't the point anymore. When the judge dismissed the jury, the courtroom erupted, supporters embracing, reporters shouting questions. Marcus grinned, shaking her hand firmly. You did it, Naomi. We did it, she corrected. The days that followed were a blur. News outlets across the country ran the headline. Black law professor wins racial profiling case against police officer. Civil rights organizations hailed it as a significant precedent. Legal journals dissected the body cam evidence, the cross-examination tactics, the jury's award. And in communities across America, people shared the story as proof that sometimes the system could be forced to listen. But Naomi knew the victory was not the end, just a crack in a wall that still loomed high. One evening, weeks after the verdict, Naomi returned to the dealership where it had all started. The same young salesman who'd handled her paperwork was there, and when he saw her, he lit up. Dr. Harris, I saw the trial on TV. I can't tell you how proud we are that you didn't back down. She smiled faintly. I didn't feel like I had a choice. He shook his head. Most people would have just let it go. Naomi looked out at the lot, at the cars gleaming under the setting sun. That's the problem. Driving home in her Tesla, still the same midnight blue, still smelling faintly of leather, Naomi thought about the young janitor in the courthouse hallway, about the students who had emailed her saying she'd given them courage, about her mother's voice in her head. She knew there would be other battles. For other people, in other places. And maybe she wouldn't be there for all of them. But she'd been there for this one. As she pulled into her driveway, the street lamps flickered on, casting a golden light over her car. She sat there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the cooling engine, letting the weight of the past months settle into something lighter. This car had been the trigger for someone else's suspicion, but for her, it was a reminder. A reminder that dignity could be defended, that truth could stand its ground, that justice, though fragile, was not impossible. Naomi stepped out, locked the door, and walked inside. Somewhere in the night, a siren wailed. She didn't flinch, because now, she knew when power tried to decide her worth, she had the strength and the will to answer back. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.